All right. This is John Reed of Diginomica, and I have a guest that I've never had before, but it should have happened a long time ago. Let's be honest. I got Jelena. I don't even have to pronounce your last name and screw it up.
Thank you, John, for having me. I'm Jelena Perfiljeva from Boring Enterprise Nerds. And,
yes.
Yeah, cool. Excited to be here.
And you're a longtime SAP developer.
Yeah.
You're also an outspoken community member with a reputation for a little bit of pot stirring.
Uh-oh.
Are we right?
Yeah, I guess so.
I think we're right about that. We are at ASUG Tech Connect.
Yeah.
And we are in the final day. So this is sort of a review podcast. And Tech Connect is one of the events that have kind of emerged in the sort of so-called new tech ed tour.
Mm-hmm.
This event is sort of a cross between more higher level decision makers, but also some developers. And you had a well-attended developer session today, which I want to talk about because that was really interesting.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I did a session for developers. My partner, Paul Moderman, unfortunately could not be here.
Shout out to Paul.
Shout out to Paul. Get well soon, please. And it was what is called unfiltered conversation. And we intentionally wanted to have just a sort of ask me anything format session where we can have a conversation with developers about their experiences, what are their hopes and dreams, or maybe biggest questions and frustrations. So it was no slides, pretty much session, just getting people in the room together and talking. And unsurprisingly, clean core was a very hit kind of subject with the group that we happened to be there. People had some pretty strong words to say about that.
Yeah. And that was really interesting too, because I think partially because it was the last day, people maybe a little bit of a kind of hangover from the week. Like it started out pretty slow, but you know, people were chiming in, but it didn't have that like dynamic feeling.
Yeah.
But when you hit on clean core,
everyone's just like perked up all of a sudden.
So that's really interesting, right? Like that topic really cuts to the heart of like both like concerns, maybe also possibilities, but that's really the lightning rod issue.
Yeah. It's very, very controversial.
Yeah.
Definitely. And what I kind of noted, and not just from session, but also from talking to developers afterwards, that there is a lot of disconnect between SAP messaging and what is actually happening in the boots on the ground demographic with actual developers. Because many times this clean core message is received by, let's say, IT managers or people who are in higher up positions who don't really deal with development, and they somehow hear, oh, clean core is something we should be doing. And then without even giving it much thought, they go into their organizations and they're like, oh, we need to do clean core. And to developers, it's like, well, whoop-de-doo. It's as if we didn't know all along that modifications were bad, that was a known fact. And now this strange message kind of making its rounds through SAP marketing to managers and somehow trickling down to developers. I think that circle is not very productive, to be honest. And on the developer side, there is, I hesitate to call it resentment, but I struggle to find better words towards SAP kind of doing this to us. Because I was in SAP session about clean core, and half of it was, well, you're preaching to the choir here. I don't mind doing your clean core, but are you enabling us to do that? That is, I think, a question that still remains for larger part unanswered by SAP, or the answers are just not really what's relevant.
Yeah, I want to get further into that discussion. And I also thought, and I'll touch on this a bit later too, but I think we run the risk of sort of the same thing happening with AI, and not just from SAP, but inside of companies. I don't think the audience caught on to my remark about that today, but I do think they're going to face this, which is this pressure of like, oh, you can achieve all these efficiencies with AI, generating code. Where are my efficiencies? And I think it's going to be again, another feeling of a something that might be useful, but it's going to feel like it's imposed rather than like trusting the developer, but also, like you said, giving them tools they really need. Anyway, I think that affects a little bit of the energy and morale of the discussion, unfortunately. So hopefully we can find our way through that. But I want to step back though, because I think it's valuable for the listener to have a little bit of insight into how you have emerged as a really vocal presence in the community, because you also work on projects and you have all of that, but you've always been driven by this, I think, a sort of a passion for community involvement, which is it safe to say can sometimes be a little love-hate, right? But what drives that for you?
I would say, to me, it maybe started with getting something from community first, because when I started with SAP development, that was a long time ago, and it was also the beginning years of SAP community, which was called SDN at that time.
Right.
And of course, I went to that nice website and I found answers to some questions that I had. For example, I posted one of my first questions there, and people just came back with amazing answers that were really helpful. So after a while, just getting something from it, I thought, okay, I think maybe I should contribute something. And I started with just answering questions for others, because that's what others did to me. So it was kind of pay it backwards, if you will, pay it back to the community. And then next step was when one of the founding persons of the community, Marilyn Pratt, I'm sure, John, you know Marilyn well. So she actually reached out to me. I got a phone call, believe it or not, from Marilyn once when I posted about the first SAP community migration. It was back in 2012 when they changed from SDN, Developer Network, to SCN, SAP Community Network, to kind of engage bigger communities than just developers. So there are some frustrations around that, and Marilyn reached out to me personally. And you know how sometimes there is a saying, as an introvert, some extrovert found me and adopted me. Is that how I have any friends? So very similar situation maybe happened with Marilyn and myself. And it's not just me. I know Marilyn discovered many other people. She's a really great person, community-minded. And so that's how I got involved, with some help from other people, and then gradually just more encouragement, quiet encouragement sometimes from others. That's how I ended up here.
How we ended up creating a monster. No, it's funny too, because if anyone is like, oh my God, this conversation, blame Marilyn, man, because Marilyn's like a big reason why I sort of got further involved as well. And I think it's really interesting how just a desire to kind of pay it forward for the help you received, and then, but I think over time what happened, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is I think you started to realize that you could have a important voice, that for whatever reason you're willing to say things that other people aren't willing to say, and that becomes important in a community like this. And so you've kind of sort of embraced that, and willing to take the heat sometimes too, right?
I mean, somewhat maybe advantage situation, because I have just nothing to lose. There are some people in communities who cannot speak up. Like, for example, people who maybe work for SAP, or maybe people who are just not in a position to speak up openly for whatever reason. And I hope that I can just use my position of being, I can say anything, well, not really anything, but anything reasonable, and I'm not going to get fired for it, literally. I think it's an advantage that would be a waste not to use. And
that's one thing I picked up on over the years too, working with so many enterprise communities, is that a lot of customers have concerns that don't get surfaced because they don't feel comfortable speaking.
Oh, yeah.
And even vendors that claim to listen to their customers, there is an undercurrent still where customers are conscious of this and they don't necessarily want to step out into the limelight. And so I think someone like yourself, you've always been able to amplify those voices. And I would love to actually have a podcast on kind of what happened to the SAP community and where do we go from here. But we're not going to do that today.
Not today.
Sorry, folks. I know some of you would probably really enjoy that, and we could get into the whole SAP mentor saga, but we're not doing that today. But I do think it's interesting in the context of this show, because one of the things I will give ASUG credit for is their willingness to kind of bring in outspoken outside perspectives like yours and mine, and not just stick with the classic, like, here's the partners and here's SAP. They bring us in and they want to mix it up a little bit. And I think that I give them a lot of credit, because I think that helps to bring this open tone. And you saw this the last couple of days of people honestly discussing their challenges. So that's one of the things I like about this event.
It's definitely appreciated. And I don't say it just because ASUG invited us. I sincerely appreciate their support and what they're doing for SAP customers with whatever power they have. So, yeah.
And anyway, for those of you that want to follow more deeply some of these things, I encourage you to pick up on the Boring Enterprise Nerds. And I was really glad to see the emergence of that, because I think, there's a great history in the SAP community of groups like the Enterprise Geeks that kind of formed, you could think, like culture around SAP. And I think you've kind of succeeded in kind of starting to do that again around this topic. So feel free to dig into that, folks, if you want to get more into those topics. But anyway, as for this show, what are you sort of before we get back into your session, what are your sort of general impressions of what you saw and learned this week?
Just in general about the event, it's great to see many more people. I've heard it's about twice the size of last year's event, which is great, I think, progress, honestly. And I think it's also good that it is co-located with TechEd. Also, obviously, my own personal preference would be to have more like designated maybe TechEd or designated conference. But I mean, it is what it is. I think we're still, as society, still recovering from some of the events of the past. And it is definitely great progress. So I think as far as path, we are, I think, on the right trajectory there. So some notes, as usual, customer sessions, I think, are the best at all of these events. Even at the TechEd, when there was customer sessions, they were also always great content, because then you hear the real war stories, or you can even hear some of failure stories maybe, or not so success stories, which are I think the best, to be honest. There were quite a few SAP sessions. I think some of those sessions, at least some of what I went to, they reflected maybe state of slight confusion within SAP, maybe where some announcements were made, but maybe the product is not really quite there, or there isn't maybe perfect clarity even like within organization, like what exactly are we doing with this? So there were some kind of hit or miss sessions. Some of them were great, also presented by SAP, so some great content, but it might be case with any event where, you miss some of them are great, some of them not so great. I really like the energy at this event as well. And if I may add, from my perspective as woman in IT, at TechEd, every year you'd go to TechEd in Las Vegas, there would be a line to the men's room and never a line in the ladies' room. Yeah. And this event is the first time when people just were leaving the keynote, big hall of keynote, and ladies' room was full. So my restroom index for this event is off the charts, which is great, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I would say about this event is you're right about customer presentations, but I think in general, the sessions that work well here are the ones where the presenters engage the audience, because the viewpoints from the audience were strong and people were mostly very willing to raise their hands and say things. Yeah. And you really get a sense of a contrast between where SAP says things are and where customers are. And I want to emphasize that doesn't mean that customers disagree with the direction that SAP has charted out. But I think there's definitely a reality check for SAP and for SAP leaders who were at this show to kind of see, okay, this is where customers are at. And I think that's really vitally important. And one thing I'll also say is that I think the AI part of the conversation here was just about right in the sense that it has not dominated the conference. And I think that's appropriate because right now, even though customers did attend the AI sessions, we went to a really good Joule session on the first day together. And then there's other sessions that were well attended. There's interest in the topic. But right now, I think it's fair to say for most customers, there's more pressing issues on the table, right? With the S/4HANA migrations and the deadlines around and the maintenance and the clean core discussions that are really kind of hitting. So that's my impression, is that the AI thing was just about right here, which was, there's interest and we're going to talk about it, but we're not going to let it dominate the entire agenda.
There was, diversity of content was I thought, very, very good here. Yeah, I agree.
So let's get back into a little bit of this clean core thing, because I think that really cuts to the heart of a lot of issues. So are you kind of saying that you do kind of agree with the clean core direction, but you just don't like some of the ways it's been handled? Or what would be your position?
So if I were to summarize, and again, it's mostly my personal position, but I did, while talking to others, I heard similar sentiment. I think everyone is pretty much on board with the idea, and I do not disagree with it on principle myself, not at all. I wholeheartedly agree that it's a great idea to do enhancements, customizations, however, through the appropriate ways. I completely on board with that. What I have problem with is SAP basically telling us, like, you need to do clean core, but not giving developers enough tools to do that, and basically not releasing APIs that should be released, I think, because and the message then comes across as slightly condescending, because I was shaking my head through the session about clean core. It's like, wow, as if we didn't know that we're not supposed to do that. But what are we supposed to do then? Because our business customers, they want us to do things that SAP does not do as part of standard. They have certain processes they want to run. They want to automate certain things, and we have to do it for them. Especially as consultant, I deal with it a lot more when I was working internally for customers, and you have more sway maybe to say, hold on a second, it's a good idea, but if we do that, imagine our long-term cost, or imagine what type of effort it's going to take and long-term impact on maintenance and everything. In a consulting, there is a little bit less of it. And it's not because I'm a greedy consultant that just wants to take your money and give you whatever and saddle you up with long-term maintenance costs. It's not at all like that. But I'm less in a position to decline, because that's a purpose of consulting job. I do what you hired us to do. Mm-hmm. So there is some...
Can I just ask you about that, though?
Yeah.
Because don't you think that part of this is an interesting discussion on what a consultant really is? Isn't part of a good consultant being an advisor to say, look, like, I'll do this for you if you really want it, but my recommendation is like a little bit different? Like, isn't that part of what a good consultant does?
We do it every time.
Yeah.
Every time on our project, almost in every project, it's like that. Sometimes I'd say, I do not advise you to do that, but sometimes my hands are tied because the customer is like,
wants,
I maybe hear you or do not hear you, decline to hear you or whatever. We want this.
Yeah.
This is exactly. Yeah. And sometimes, honestly, I even write comments about this in the program because I want to warn potential, like, future developers who would be maintaining this code that, look, we tried really hard to look for something else. We couldn't. If future developer, you find something better, then maybe do better, but we just couldn't. So, and that's unfortunately the reality of ABAP development world. What we have, tools that we have right now, APIs that we have right now, that's what we have. That's what we need to work with today, not like in 5 years or whatever. We need to develop to deliver results for our business customers and they expect us to do that by any means necessary sometimes.
This is really interesting to me because I spent a lot of time in the cloud ERP mid-market with other vendors and talking a lot to other customers. And through all of that work over all these years at Diginomica, I've really become, because a big part of my story is like still being connected to SAP, but having a much broader purview. And I think that's honestly helped me a lot to see the pros and cons of what SAP does better. And I become pretty sold on the overall business value of sort of what you might call multi-tenant SaaS with an extension model, an API model versus like over customizing software, because I've seen so many of the benefits of easier upgrades and easier absorption of new functionality and all of that stuff and quote unquote less technical debt. Now, having said that, people in that industry have a tendency to idealize those things and claim that there's no integration issues and no testing issues. And that's, of course, bullshit. It's not a perfect system. I do think it's generally a better system, but I do acknowledge that one size doesn't fit all in this thing. And there are, in the SAP world, for example, some very sophisticated organizations with IT. And when you're dealing with sophisticated organizations that want to call their own shots around how they manage clouds and development and stuff, I think they should be able to do that. And if that includes customizations that are a little dirty in the core, I think to some extent, if they have a good rationale for it, that's their call.
Yeah.
But what I think is really interesting about what you said is, by and large, what you're saying is that, because I used to encounter a lot of resistance in this topic amongst the developer community in SAP, but if the developer community, by and large, accepts the premise of the clean core at this point, then I think you're correct that it puts the onus back on SAP to listen and to say, okay, you buy in, but you have an issue with how we're enabling it.
Yeah.
Then SAP needs to solve that, right? Because the developers are saying, look, we agree, but so what is the but? Like, what kinds of tools would make this better?
And I just had a great conversation with a group of developers, and I was surprised how we immediately agreed on this, that SAP keeps saying, oh, if you need something, then we need to get feedback from you, which is a valid point. But the way how they choose to gather that feedback, it's simply not working. And we have been saying it for a while, but seem to be falling on deaf ears mostly. So what SAP invited us to do is you have to go to their influence website, or they call it CPI or something, where you have to register, you have to find the right place to put your suggestion in. And then when 6 partners or customers agree to the same suggestion, so they vote for it or whatever happens, then SAP will deliver it. Which, that's a one way to do it. But what developers had in mind is more like, well, we're developers, first of all. Why do you need separate website? And that requires SID, most likely, to go in and register there and do something and then wait for 6 other people to do the same thing. You have, for example, API Hub already, which was renamed. I keep forgetting the current name, but it's api.sap.com. Can you put a feedback button right there? It's a website. Should be able to do that. So instead of 6 customers, how do you say, well, if 100 developers tell you that they would like that, then maybe we should do that.
So what would be an example of something that would make clean core concepts easier for developers to manage? What would be an example of the type of thing that would help?
So 2 things. First of all, you actually need those released APIs. You need those replacements if that's what you want us to use. When there is just nothing to replace it with, what are we talking about? There is nothing to talk about. Then if those replacements exist, instead of just talking about, from high horse about principles, etc., you just give people very simple guide. You used to do X, now you do Y. But I think when you try to do that, it becomes very quickly apparent that there is no Y for many cases. So that's why I think maybe that very simple guide from X to Y have not materialized just yet. Because one good example was when SAP went ahead with ABAP tools on Eclipse. And there was a really great guide in SAP documentation, which was exactly like that. Oh, in SAP GUI, you used to do this in ABAP editor, and now in Eclipse, you do that to achieve the same result. Here is your new way. And that was super helpful to experienced developers, because that's exactly how we operate. Okay, we have lots of experience on the left side. Now we need to move to the right side. How do we do that? Well, here is a very simple guide. There is nothing like that, to my knowledge, for Clean Core. There are some guides, but they're non-specific like that. They do not tell you, like, for example, like your sales user exit can be replaced with this body or something along those lines.
So your position would essentially be that SAP can take a step back from the sort of sales pitch or emphasis on, why Clean Core matters, and kind of take a step back from that and instead broach a conversation on how can we support developer teams to get there, like that they need to kind of shift the conversation and make it easy for that to happen.
Because okay, we agree. Now, how do we get there?
That's interesting, because that is a step forward that the agreement has been reached, but it does put the onus on SAP to then shift. And I don't know about SSID, but maybe a podcast will work. Then you won't have to do that ideation exercise. Maybe just sounding off in a podcast will help a little bit. That's interesting. It's a little bit of a parallel with what I've seen with AI this fall, which is like my thing around vendors really overselling AI as opposed to explaining how it can help, what the pros and cons are, and really like it's like, do you realize the audience is already bought in, right? Like they realize this isn't blockchain. This is something that is real, but they still want to understand, like they might not always want to use it, but they want to understand more on what the pros and cons are, what the mistakes customers make are, what the challenges are. And instead you're getting the sales pitch that doesn't need to happen anymore. So anyway,
we're sold.
That's
move on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So there were other really interesting things I thought in your session, because the thing I kind of picked up on, in addition to the Clean Core controversy touching a chord, is maybe a feeling that developers are a little overwhelmed by everything on their plate. You put on this pie chart that had everything from like all the hats that developers wear, right? Like from solution architect, enterprise architect, like process expert, consultant, like with all the process analysis and mining tools and stuff. So that's a challenge too, right? Is like how you handle all the stuff that's being put on your plate and all the different roles.
There is definitely a lot expected from SAP developers, who are still mostly ABAP developers, I would say, these days. And I think it maybe affects disproportionately people working at customers in customer internal IT, because very frequently they are really strapped. Their teams, they have seen layoffs. Their teams have become smaller, but their workload has not become smaller. It's increased, if anything, and they are kind of confused sometimes. They don't get maybe support or financing, or even encouragement from management or business. And it's actually has been going on, I think, in SAP ecosystem for a while, because traditionally ABAP developers knew much more about non-development and non-ABAP things than, let's say, just regular developer in JavaScript or some other language, because I think those, what I would call like general purpose developers, they are mostly focused on the purely development, let's say writing code. But ABAPers were expected to know how to run transactions in SAP, how processes flow. So there is a lot of kind of baggage that we started with, and it never, so our scope of ABAP, it never shrunk, it never became smaller. It ever expanding. It's like horizon that we can never reach. It just gets farther and farther. And there's definitely a lot of frustration, I think, amid developers about that. And also sometimes related to that, many developers are looking for direction. If you look at questions out there on social media, it's like, what do I learn? What do I learn so that I stay relevant? We hear about AI. Is it coming for our jobs? Is it not coming for our jobs? There's so much going on. what should I invest in? And I don't think there is a clarity on that at all.
So if you were giving advice to a team of developers at this conference that wants to go home and be more effective given everything that's on their plate, what would you say?
I think at this point you really need to look at what is specifically practical for you. I'm pretty much given up on giving generic advice.
Right.
Because every time you do that, it would be too generic. As
a side note, former Diginomica colleague that you know well, Dennis Howlett, always hated the term best practices. And I think it was like only 1 year into Diginomica when we had a talk about it, and I kind of was like, you know what, you're totally right about that. And I haven't used that term in a single article since then. I can't. And I've grown to loathe the term, you know what I mean? But it's still interesting to think about, like, how do you take this and use it, right? Because one of the things I'm obsessed with shows is like, okay, you had a great time at a show. Can we really afford that at this day and age? Isn't it about taking something back with you? So I am kind of curious about, okay, yeah, one size doesn't fit all, but what do you think people should do?
I think so. If let's say if you're an ABAP developer and you have not learned about OData development, and it can be either old-fashioned OData development in ECC, or it could be ABAP Rep, ABAP Cloud, whatever, you definitely need to do that. But I think it brings you to the modern minimal level of software development knowledge in SAP space. So there is certain baselines that everyone needs to reach. But beyond that, it's really, I think for the individual, it has more to do with their own individual preferences, because people are asking, like, do I need to learn Fiori? Well, are you interested in that? If yes, then you should. If not, there are plenty of subjects that you can learn more about. As far as taking something from the conference, I think it also has to do with, again, practical application of that knowledge. When TechEd was big event in Vegas and I was working at a customer, I would always go to some sessions that were more practical, more like down to earth about some specific things that I might be able to use right away or very soon. But I also went to some sessions that were more like cutting edge, something very unusual. And I think that's a good mix for everyone. But there needs to be some things that you can practically apply. I think there was good mix of that at this event, of things that you can come back at least and think about, oh, maybe I should learn more about this. And for ABAP specifically, I think using tools like ATC and other tools, I saw in the session it was a big revelation to many. It was surprising to me because I've known about this for a while, but many people apparently had no idea. So I think that's a good opportunity to come here and learn about things that have existed for a while.
Yeah, I think my contributions to your advice would be that it never gets old to get better at talking with business users and figuring out how to have conversations that don't get defensive, right? Because both sides can get a little defensive at times, right?
For sure.
The ABAP developer feels put upon by business requirements that don't make sense, given the current software. And the business person can feel, a little bit of that whole. Sometimes the IT person can come off a little strong too. So I think learning how to pull requirements out of business users and really have that good conversation. I think that never gets old to me, no matter what the technology you're talking about. It's
definitely.
Just human relationships, really. And so I talked for a long time about the end of the cubicle coder, and to me, a big part of that is you exist in a human context. So I think that's big. But then the other thing, my other unsolicited thing, is just about AI, because I feel that there's going to be a lot of executive pressure around, are you adopting AI code generation if you're a developer? And I think developers just need to get out in front of that and figure out to what extent can these tools help, to what extent cannot. So that, for example, let's say that you're a pretty senior ABAP developer and you experiment with these code generation tools, either SAPs or non-SAP, and you find that actually it takes longer to debug the new code than not for you. But maybe you find that it does help a junior teammate to get started, but then, whatever. I think being able to be out in front of that conversation is important so that if someone comes to you and says, hey, can you use this or that? You say, well, actually, we've already worked on this and here's how it will help me, but not very much, but it will help this other person more so that people get more satisfied with that. Because otherwise, I think they're going to come in and just be like, why aren't you more efficient with these tools? Because everyone's reading these headlines saying like, this is going to, automate development and all this crap, which is totally, in my opinion, overhyped. But, I do think there are times where in some cases it will be useful, especially I think talking with a friend of mine who works for one of the big SIs, he's talking about situations, for example, where ABAPs, this isn't as much of an issue, but certain languages that might be deprecated either inside your organization or in general, and you have all this back catalog of stuff and you want to update it. Maybe code generation will really help you to get a leg up or something, but I think it's good to be proactive about that because I think you will get pressure from the outside on that. That's my opinion. Anyway,
in general, we always recommend developers to just be curious about things. And I know that SAP pushing Joule a lot and they were talking about Joule for ABAP, etc. But you don't have to wait for Joule. You can go to ChatGPT today and ask it to generate, ALV report. It's a good use case. For example, the one that I tried just recently was, I need just a boilerplate temporary test program to fill in some table with data. And I also want to have ALV output of the result. So I gave this to ChatGPT and the first version wasn't really great. So I had to kind of poke it and probe it and suggest like, why don't you, while you're using old function module, use something else. But I think if you simply go and do that, you will understand how it works and how you can make it work better for you, and just not be completely surprised when, like you said, John, your management is going to come to you and say, how about we start using AI here? You would be better prepared for those conversations.
Yeah, I think the conversation is going to go so much better if you can give a real honest view of we tried these tools, here's what works, here's what doesn't, here's what needs improvement. Just a much more realistic conversation. I am curious about this in your own work though, because my guess is that you were probably initially pretty resistant to the hype around this, but that you probably did play around with it. So what are you finding? Like, does it accelerate your development capabilities, or is it more useful for like supplemental things? Like, does it help you personally in your coding?
Yeah, I mean, for ABAPers, we all know that most of our time is spent to find what unreleased API we need to use to achieve business requirements. So that's majority of the time, and not the actual writing of the code.
Right.
But I would say
the code writing is a smaller part of the job, essentially.
and that's why in ABAP space it's just not really a huge selling point. But having said that, when you simply need something boilerplate, like I just mentioned, or like ALV report, that's I think pretty boilerplate at this point. You really can save a lot of time by just having ChatGPT or whomever, whichever your preferred solution, do at least the first version for you. And I think people sometimes approach it wrongly. It's like all or nothing. It's like, it didn't give me like perfect results, so screw this. It doesn't work. No, I mean, it can give you a decent starting point and you can just file to the specification after that and just make adjustments that you need. It's, but as your helper, there is not denying that they're definitely used for many AI tools.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I am on a little bit of a parallel track with the writing side of it because for me, since I've been writing is one of the few sort of inherent talents that I've ever had in life, it doesn't do anything for me. Like if I generate a page of text and then try to rework it to my satisfaction, I'm better off starting with a blank screen. But, in fairness, I have met a lot of people who have found various writing benefits from these tools. Because for whatever reason, maybe English is a second language issues or, other just insecurities around putting words to a page or So I think it requires a little bit of an open mind around like that not everyone is going to derive the same type of value, but you can definitely bet that the experiments are worth it just to try to stay a little bit ahead of the curve. I personally think that some of the strengths of these tools are different than what is being advertised on stage. And so for example, like, you know, you really have to bear down on what works and why. Like meeting summaries, yeah, that seems really cool because it's great at summarization, but you know, when I go to a meeting, sometimes the most important things are just very subtle things, like even the look on someone's face where you can tell that they're discouraged by the meeting. Like, yeah, maybe AI can eventually pick up on some of the sentiment stuff, but it might even be just a little offhand comment that isn't really the core to the whole thing. So I think just really understanding the strengths of those things. And so I think that's a really big takeaway for me. And yet I'll be honest with you, I don't think that's where people's heads are at this show. I think people are really more preoccupied with whatever is on their plate that SAP has put on. So I really get this feeling that the impression I get is people are just close to being maxed out and they really need this information and they're feeling some pressure. So I'm really glad that they made it onto a plane to get down here because they clearly were getting that. And I thought the biggest thing was not just the information, but I would see these moments where people would connect with each other, right? So for example, 2 women in a session that I was at that are both in the beauty and cosmetics industry. And like 5 minutes ago, they didn't know each other. And now they're like swapping war stories. I'm like, that's friggin' gold. You know what I mean? Like if you're an event organizer, that is gold.
And you know, one thing I just remember, I shamelessly overheard at lunchtime. So I was sitting next to a group of people and they were talking, oh, where is Joe? Joe is nowhere here. And they said, well, Joe went back to his hotel because he didn't have any sessions. And he said, I will never get 8 hours to try things that I just learned here when I go home. So Joe is essentially using this time here right now at the event, just not physical on location, but like he's done with the session, done some learning, and he just went to the hotel to straight up go and try hands-on some things. And I can totally relate to that because, how many people, John, did you see here with laptops all the time, like on their phones, and clearly they're working while they're here instead of just devoting time to learning. So in some cases, learning and spending time on it, it's a luxury that is not always available. So, but I'm glad that Joe really got his chance to spend this time and learn and apply knowledge, most importantly.
It's really kind of sad that we've reached that point, but because I think
depressing.
Well, because like immersion time, I think is so important. That's something that developers and writers have in common. You know, that like in Diginomica, like one of my biggest struggles is, especially when I'm on the road, is finding that more focused time to gather my thoughts and write. And I think the same is probably true of almost all developers, right? Is if you can't get that, and it's kind of sad that more employers don't think about like, how do we protect the windows, right? So quote unquote Joe, you know, persona Joe. I don't
not his real name. I don't know.
Right. But that's kind of in a way too bad that the employer doesn't see. Okay, Joe needs protected time to learn. But having said that, kudos to this individual for knowing that's what they needed to do, right?
Exactly.
Like so hats off. Well, I think we learned a fair amount, but now we're at the point where we're going to lose the room. So any final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, come to the event next year, and please continue attending your ASUG chapter meetings or whichever events are available in your area. Because if no one comes to those events, they're not going to survive. People need to show up. And I think if anyone wants those events to continue, wants to be part of community, wants to learn and excel, just start showing up. That's,
Cool. Well, sorry we didn't get into the full community at SAP controversy, but Maybe someday, but for now, we had a great discussion. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.